Imagine for a moment that your body is a battlefield, not in the way we might think when we speak of stress or injury, but in the truest biological sense. Every breath you take, every surface you touch, every bite of food you consume introduces you to a hidden universe of microscopic organisms. Most of them pass by unnoticed, many of them are harmless, and a surprising number of them are actually beneficial, forming part of a living shield that keeps us strong. But woven among these companions are others that are far less friendly. Opportunistic invaders that, given the right moment, can unleash infections capable of changing the course of your life. This invisible struggle goes on day and night, whether we pay attention to it or not. We like to think of health as something static, something we either have or don't have. But the truth is that health is a dynamic equilibrium, a balance struck between our immune system and the countless microbes we encounter. Infectious disease occurs when that balance is broken, when a bacterium, a virus, or a parasite tips the scales in its favor. It is not an abstract medical term, it is a deeply human experience. A cough that won't go away, a fever that suddenly escalates, a loved one who goes from vibrant to fragile in just a few days. These moments remind us that despite all of our technological progress, we remain participants in nature's oldest contest, survival. What makes this even more sobering is how easily we forget the history of these battles. Barely a century ago, infectious diseases like tuberculosis, pneumonia, and typhoid were leading causes of death, not just in underdeveloped regions, but in cities we now associate with progress and prosperity. Families lived in fear of outbreaks that could sweep through communities like fire through dry grass. Then came antibiotics, a discovery so profound it was celebrated as nothing short of a miracle. For the first time in human history, we had a weapon that could turn the tide. Infections that once killed millions could be treated within days. It changed medicine, it changed life expectancy, and it changed the way we thought about disease itself. And yet, what we sometimes fail to acknowledge is that the war never ended. The battleground simply shifted. Bacteria never gave up. They never stopped adapting. They have been evolving for billions of years, long before we ever walked the earth, and they are masters of survival. They can divide in minutes, share genetic material with each other like students passing notes, and learn to resist the very drugs we designed to destroy them. While we live in the comfort of our daily routines, they live in constant competition, refining their ability to endure. This is why infectious disease is not just a medical challenge, but a philosophical one. It forces us to reflect on our place in the natural order. We are not above nature, not separate from it, but participants in a vast web of life where survival is earned, not guaranteed. Every infection is a reminder that we are vulnerable beings, reliant on both the wisdom of science and the discipline of our choices. Do we complete the course of antibiotics when prescribed, or do we stop early because we feel better? Do we pressure our physicians into giving us drugs for viral illnesses that don't respond to them, simply because we want a quick fix? These small, seemingly insignificant decisions feed into the larger story of resistance, giving bacteria the opportunity to regroup, rearm, and return stronger than before. There's also a psychological dimension that cannot be ignored. Fear of illness is one of the deepest human fears because it threatens not only our body but our sense of control. We live in an age where we expect certainty, where we turn to medicine for answers, for solutions, for guarantees. But infectious disease strips away that illusion. It humbles us. It reminds us that health is fragile, that life is never fully within our command, and that wisdom lies in respect for nature, for science, and for the boundaries of our own behavior. And yet, this is not a message of despair. If anything, it is a call to awareness. Awareness that the war inside our bodies is real, ongoing, and demands our participation. Awareness that each of us, by practicing responsibility in how we approach antibiotics, hygiene, vaccination, and lifestyle, contributes to the strength or weakness of our collective defenses. Awareness that this is not just about medicine, but about mindset, choosing vigilance over complacency, patience over impulse, wisdom over convenience. When you step back and look at the sweep of human history, one truth becomes clear: survival is never passive. It is active, intentional, and sustained by choices made in the quiet moments of daily life. The invisible war inside our bodies may never fully end, but we are not powerless in the face of it. Each decision matters, each act of responsibility tilts the balance toward health. And perhaps the greatest lesson of all is this: the smallest creatures on earth can only overpower us if we surrender the wisdom to see them for what they are. Teachers reminding us that vigilance is the price of survival. So as you leave here today, remember that your body is not just a vessel you inhabit, it is a battleground you are called to defend. And the strength of that defense begins with awareness, responsibility, and respect for the war within. When we talk about antibiotics, we are talking about one of the greatest revolutions in human history. Before their discovery, even a minor infection could be a death sentence. A scratch on the arm, a tooth extraction, a cut during childbirth. These were not trivial concerns. They were life-threatening possibilities. Antibiotics changed that. They gave humanity a shield, a weapon that turned once deadly infections into treatable conditions. To many, they felt like magic, as if we had finally gained mastery over the microscopic world that had haunted us for centuries. But every miracle carries a shadow. Antibiotics, as powerful as they are, were never meant to be used without care. They were designed to save lives when nothing else could. Instead, over the decades, they have been prescribed too often, taken too casually, and even misused in places we hardly imagine, like in agriculture to fatten animals or sprayed on crops to prevent disease. What was once a carefully guarded treasure has become an everyday commodity, and with that casualness has come a cost we can no longer afford to ignore. The irony is that the very thing that saved us is now threatening to fail us. Think of antibiotics as a double-edged sword. On one side, they protect us. On the other, they can harm us when wielded carelessly. This harm is not always immediate. It does not always look like a sudden reaction or a direct side effect. Instead, it accumulates quietly in the background as bacteria learn, adapt, and slowly build resistance. The miracle of antibiotics becomes less miraculous each time we use them without true need. And here lies a deeper psychological truth. As humans, we are drawn to shortcuts. We crave certainty and we want quick fixes. A cough, a fever, a sore throat. Too often, we demand an antibiotic prescription as if it were a guarantee of healing, a safety net that spares us the discomfort of waiting for the body to recover on its own. But antibiotics do not work on viral infections, and using them when they are unnecessary only strengthens the bacteria that already know how to fight back. The immediate relief we seek blinds us to the long-term consequence. We are fueling a future where antibiotics no longer work when we desperately need them. Consider the philosophy behind this. We live in an age where science and medicine have given us extraordinary power, but power without wisdom is always dangerous. Antibiotics ask us to practice restraint, to use them only when absolutely necessary, to trust our bodies, and to respect the limits of medicine. They are not meant to be a convenience, they are meant to be a lifeline. And when we confuse one for the other, we slowly dull the blade that has protected us for generations. Think of how easily this happens in everyday life. A patient begins a course of antibiotics but stops midway because they feel better. In that moment, they may believe they are making a harmless decision, saving a few pills for later. But what they don't realize is that the strongest bacteria may have survived, now exposed to the drug just enough to recognize its threat and prepare to resist it in the future. It's like teaching your enemy your strategies before you've won the war. Small choices made in private ripple outward to shape the future of medicine. And it is not just individuals. Entire systems contribute to this cycle. Farms using antibiotics to prevent infections in livestock, not because the animals are sick, but because it boosts growth and maximizes profit. Hospitals under pressure to satisfy patient demands, where antibiotics are prescribed just in case. Even global trade and travel spread resistant bacteria faster than we can track them. What began as a medical gift has become a cultural habit, and that habit is eroding the foundation of our defenses. Now, I want you to pause and reflect. What does it mean when the very medicine we rely on becomes less reliable? It means the balance of power is shifting back toward the bacteria. It means surgeries we consider routine, like hip replacements or C-sections, could once again become life-threatening. It means infections from a simple cut or a dental procedure could spiral out of control. The thought itself should be enough to shake us from complacency. But despair is not the answer. Responsibility is. We must relearn how to respect antibiotics, not as everyday tools, but as sacred instruments of healing, used sparingly and wisely. This respect begins with education, with each of us understanding that antibiotics are not painkillers, not catch-all cures, but precision weapons that must be preserved. It continues with policy, with health systems that encourage stewardship and reduce misuse. And it thrives in culture. When patients learn to ask not, can I have an antibiotic, but do I really need one? The future of antibiotics is not solely in the hands of scientists developing new drugs. It is also in our hands, in the choices we make at home, in the expectations we set for our doctors, in the patience we practice with our bodies. Each act of restraint is a vote for survival, a small but powerful step toward preserving the gift we inherited. So the question becomes simple. Will we treat antibiotics as miracles to be respected or conveniences to be squandered? The answer to that question will decide not just the future of medicine, but the future of our children and grandchildren. And here is the truth I leave you with: antibiotics will either remain our greatest shield or they will become our greatest regret. The choice lies not only in science, but in us. When we think of human progress, we often celebrate our ability to outsmart nature. We split the atom, mapped the human genome, landed on the moon, all symbols of our ingenuity. But there is one adversary that continues to remind us of our limits: bacteria. These organisms are so small that millions can fit on the head of a pin, yet they possess a survival instinct that has humbled the most advanced medical systems on Earth. We call this phenomenon antibiotic resistance, but in reality, it is a simple truth: bacteria are learning to outsmart us, and they are doing it faster than we expected. The reason is both fascinating and terrifying. Bacteria live in a constant state of competition. In their world, survival depends on adaptation. While a human life may stretch across decades, a bacterium divides in minutes. Every division is a chance for mutation, and every mutation is a chance for resistance. Imagine billions of coin flips happening every second. Eventually, one will land in a way that gives bacteria the ability to withstand our drugs. And once that resistance emerges, it doesn't stay contained. Bacteria share genes like we share stories. They pass along their survival tricks, even to unrelated species, turning isolated victories into widespread threats. We've seen this unfold with alarming speed. Strains of tuberculosis now exist that resist nearly every drug we've developed. Staphylococcus aureus, once easily treatable, has morphed into MRSA, an infection so tenacious it can spread through hospitals, leaving doctors scrambling for options. Gonorrhea, a disease most thought we had under control, is returning in forms that no longer respond to our standard therapies. These so-called superbugs are not rare anomalies anymore. They are becoming increasingly common, signaling a future where the medicine we once trusted could fail us entirely. But here's the deeper point: resistance is not simply a biological event, it is also a mirror reflecting human behavior. We created this crisis through overuse, misuse, and neglect. Each time antibiotics are taken unnecessarily, each time they are prescribed as a convenience rather than a necessity, each time we cut corners and don't finish the full course, we push bacteria to evolve. We may think we are defeating them, but in truth, we are training them. And unlike us, bacteria never forget the lessons we teach them. This is why antibiotic resistance is not just a medical problem, it is a philosophical one. It forces us to confront a question we rarely ask: what happens when human arrogance collides with nature's resilience? We wanted a permanent victory over infection, but bacteria remind us that permanence does not exist in a world built on change. Their survival strategy is humility in action, constant adaptation, constant evolution. Ours, by contrast, has been overconfidence, a belief that our discoveries put us above the natural order. Resistance is nature's way of reminding us that there are no shortcuts to balance, no guarantees of control. The consequences of this imbalance reach beyond the hospital walls. Think of surgery, a hip replacement, a cesarean delivery, or even chemotherapy. None of these are safe without effective antibiotics to prevent infection. If resistance continues to grow, modern medicine, as we know it, begins to unravel. What was once routine becomes risky, and what was once curable becomes untreatable. We would find ourselves transported back to a time when infections claimed lives indiscriminately, undoing nearly a century of progress. And yet, despair is not the answer. The remarkable thing about resistance is that it can be slowed, even reversed, if we act with clarity and discipline. That means choosing responsibility in the smallest decisions, taking antibiotics only when prescribed, never pressuring doctors for them unnecessarily, completing the full treatment even when we feel better. It means supporting medical policies that prioritize stewardship, encouraging research into new therapies, and demanding accountability from industries that misuse antibiotics for profit. The war against resistance is fought as much in daily life as it is in laboratories. There's also a psychological shift we must embrace, moving from a mindset of entitlement to one of stewardship. Too often we treat antibiotics as if they were infinite, a resource that will always be there when we need it. But in truth, they are a finite gift, one that can be squandered or preserved. Stewardship is about recognizing that our actions today shape the options available to future generations. It is about humility, the humility to understand that the tiniest forms of life can undo us if we fail to respect them. So let us ask ourselves a sobering but necessary question. Do we want to live in a world where a scraped knee can end a life? Or do we want to preserve a world where medicine can protect us? The answer depends not only on scientific breakthroughs, but on the collective will of people to change their habits. The power to shift this story lies not just in the hands of governments or doctors, but in the choices each of us makes every day. Bacteria may be resilient, but so are we when we act with wisdom. If we choose respect over recklessness, stewardship over selfishness, vigilance over complacency, then resistance does not have to be the final chapter of our relationship with antibiotics. Instead, it can be the turning point where we finally learn to live in balance with the unseen world around us. And that is the truth I want to leave with you. Bacteria will always adapt. The question is, will we? So where do we go from here? After all the science, the statistics, the stories of bacteria outsmarting us, the question that lingers is not just for what is happening, but what can we do about it? Because the truth is, this fight is not lost. It is not beyond our control. But winning it requires a change in mindset, a shift from seeing antibiotics as an endless supply of solutions to recognizing them as precious tools that need to be guarded with care. The path forward begins with responsibility at every level. For doctors, it means prescribing antibiotics only when absolutely necessary, resisting the pressure to give in to patient demands for quick fixes. For patients, it means listening when a doctor says, "This is a virus, not a bacteria," and accepting that sometimes rest, hydration, and time are the true cures. It means completing a full course of treatment even when you feel better, because stopping early is like leaving the battlefield while the enemy is still standing. These may feel like small, personal decisions, but together they form the foundation of a collective defense. Responsibility doesn't end with individuals. It extends to the systems we build and the policies we uphold. We need stronger regulation of antibiotics in agriculture, where these drugs are too often used not to treat sickness, but to make animals grow faster and keep factory farming profitable. That kind of misuse doesn't just affect farms. It affects all of us, because resistant bacteria do not stay confined to barns and fields. They travel through food, water, and human contact, finding their way into hospitals and homes. Changing that requires courage from policymakers and accountability from industries that put profit before public health. Then there is the renewal, the second half of the path forward. Renewal means investing in new research, new medicines, and even new ways of thinking about medicine. We cannot assume that antibiotics alone will save us forever. We need fresh approaches, novel drugs, targeted therapies, vaccines, natural remedies, and innovations in prevention. But here's the deeper insight. Renewal is not just scientific, it is cultural. It's about renewing our respect for the relationship between humanity and nature. For too long, we've seen medicine as a way to dominate nature, to impose control. But perhaps the wiser path is to learn how to live in balance with it, to strengthen our immune systems through healthier lifestyles, to reduce the burden of disease through cleaner environments, and to prevent illness before it begins. And this is where each of us, regardless of profession or background, has power. Choosing healthier foods, exercising, managing stress, and practicing good hygiene are not just personal lifestyle choices, they are acts of public health. They reduce the need for antibiotics in the first place. They create resilience. They remind us that medicine is not just what happens in hospitals and pharmacies. It is what happens in kitchens, in schools, in communities, and in the daily decisions we make. There's also a philosophical dimension to renewal that I want us to pause on. This moment in history is a test of humility. Do we have the humility to admit that we have misused the very gift that saved us? Do we have the discipline to change our habits, even when convenience tempts us to ignore the consequences? Do we have the wisdom to think not just of ourselves, but of the generations who will inherit the world we leave behind? The rise of antibiotic resistance is not just a scientific crisis, it is a moral one. It asks whether we will choose selfishness or stewardship, short-term comfort or long-term survival. But I remain hopeful, deeply hopeful, because history shows that when humanity faces a great challenge, it finds a way forward. We ended smallpox through global cooperation. We reduced polio to near extinction through vaccines. We transformed HIV from a death sentence into a chronic, manageable condition. Time and again, we have risen to the challenge when survival demanded it. Antibiotic resistance is simply the next test, and like those before it, it requires both science and spirit, both knowledge and courage. The path forward is not about fear. It is about empowerment. It is about realizing that every prescription, every meal choice, every policy, every research breakthrough is a piece of the puzzle. And when those pieces come together, they form a picture of resilience, a society that respects medicine enough to preserve it, and a generation that chooses responsibility over recklessness. So I leave you with this: antibiotics were once a miracle. Whether they remain a miracle or become a memory depends on us. The choices we make today will echo for decades. They will decide whether our children inherit a world where infections are curable or a world where even a minor wound can take a life. The question is not whether bacteria will adapt. They always will. The question is whether we will adapt fast enough with wisdom, humility, and unity. And that is not a scientific choice. That is a human one.